Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry with Dub Bears Talk, and today I'm going to be going more in depth on Austin Booker and try to tell you everything that you need to know about him. This is another player that I did talk about as one of my favorites to Chicago for a later pick in the draft. If you watched any of my offensive or defensive line sleeper pick videos, Austin Booker was near the top of my list for a sleeper defensive lineman, as well as Karan Omega G, I believe is how you say his name now, which I said wrong in that video. But those are two top players that I had for going to the Bears, and it ended up happening, which I'm very happy about. Getting Austin Booker significantly later than we expected, which is huge for the team, and I think it'll be huge moving forward. And this is going to be why I think he could be the biggest sleeper in the draft. Very raw talent, needs a lot of work to, and didn't have a whole lot of experience. But I'm going to get into it in just a second. Before I do, like the video, comment down below what you think of Austin Booker, and if there was somebody else at that spot that you would have rather taken, or what do you think of the draft class, something along those lines. And then subscribe for more. I'm going to be going over a couple more of the players, as well as talking about other teams, I'm going to do a grade video for every team. So stay tuned for that. But let's get into it. So Austin Booker out of Kansas, 6'5", 240, 4.79 40. You can read. Pretty athletic for his size. I would say, you look at Montez Sweat on the Bears and you see a guy that's 6'6", 260 that ran a 4.39. And you say, well, he could be a lot faster. But for his size, for people that are that tall, they're typically not running that fast. And the idea is that he will eventually gain some weight, hopefully, and be able to be an aggressive threat every down, like Montez Sweat. But out of Greenwood, Indiana, which is actually only about 3 hours from Chicago, which is cool. Fairly local guy. He's probably a Colts fan, but at the very least, getting a guy who's fairly local might appreciate that. Like it talked about in the video about Karan, about how important it was being a Bears fan and that heart playing for the team. Nice that Booker's going to be a little closer to home. Let's talk about 2023. Played in 12 games. He had 56 total tackles, 27 hurries, 12 tackles for a loss, 8 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Also had a pass deflection. So that's a really good season. I think the downside is, yes, he is playing at Kansas, so he wasn't playing the greatest talent. That was really his only season. He did play in 6 games. Didn't really start very much in the previous 2 years at Minnesota. Those were, his first 2 years were in Minnesota, and then this third season was in Kansas, where he got more playing time and was able to show what he could do. Now, the Bears actually traded this pick that they drafted him at 144. They traded him for him with the Bills, and it was actually the pick that they gave the Bills for Ryan Bates. So I wanted to include that in there. I thought that was pretty interesting. I guess you could have picked, would you rather have Ryan Bates at center or Austin Booker? Well, in this case, you can have both. So why I think this was such a great pick is he was valued in the late second. Most people were saying he was bound to be a top 75 guy, and I think what ended up happening is Ryan Poles is looking at the draft, and they're in the 5th round, and they're going, Austin Booker's still there at 6'5". Some places say 6'6", 240 pounds. The long arms at 34 inches. So there's a lot there. You can't teach arm length. You can't teach height. He can add on some weight, and he can get stronger in the weight room, which he'll need to do. But those are some traits you just can't get. And he also had the production with 12 tackles for a loss, being productive in the run game, as well as sacking the quarterback. And 27 hurries was one of the higher numbers in college football. So big production out of him, out of Kansas. And really liked what I saw from him. And again, I was hoping that he would fall to us in the 3rd, or maybe in a crazy world the 4th. But we ended up getting him in the 5th. So huge move in my opinion for Ryan Poles. Pros and cons: we've got explosive first step. So his first step right off the line is very strong. That's probably his biggest pro too, with just because he is so slim. We'll talk about that in a second. But he also has a lot of pass rush moves. He can do a chop. He has a rip. He can do a spin, a swim. He kind of can do it all. The only problem there is also in the cons. It's very little experience, and it's a little tougher to grade these players that have a lower experience and just less snaps played. I didn't even put it. I think he had like 500 snaps in the 2 seasons, so not very good there either. But he's also very good at recognizing run versus pass. So he it kind of has it seemingly like when there's a running back in the backfield, kind of looking, maybe even looking for that first, and he very good at just recognizing if it's a run, just that play recognition in general. But then finding the running back, and kind of has to with his lower weight and his lower strength. He is definitely more of an agile, more of a finesse guy. But he's able to get around and make those plays. So that's big time there. And then the cons are similar to like when I talked about J.J. McCarthy, or when you would talk about Mitchell Trubisky. He just has very little experience, which I don't think you can really say is a con. It just means that the guy is more of a raw talent. He's younger. He just doesn't have as much experience yet. So it's not to say that he's not going to be as good of a ball player, but we look at Mitchell Trubisky and for the Bears, and he really only played 1 season, and that could be part of the reason that he didn't have the same success that Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes had. Or you look at J.J. McCarthy, and I don't think he's going to be all that great. He did play most of the last 2 seasons, but he wasn't in a lot of the situations where you're having to deal with being down and having to make a comeback, or just throwing the ball at all. He had I think the least, or like the second least amount of pass attempts of any quarterback out of this draft. So when you don't get to see a lot from a player, it's a lot harder to grade a player. And I don't love that I'm putting that in the con category, but you kind of have to put it in there, because if he doesn't work out, it could be, he has good traits and good intangibles, but it just didn't work out. He's very slim. Wiry is another descriptive word people have used, but at 6'5", 6'6", 240 pounds is pretty light. We saw Johnny Wilson, I believe his name was, the wide receiver, who's 6'7", like 240, and he looked very slim as well. When you're that tall, that is very skinny. You look at a lot of other defensive ends, you're probably a lot heavier than that. You're probably closer to at least even 260 is pretty light. I believe Montez Sweat's up to like 275 now at 6'6", still very quick. But Austin Booker's biggest comp that we've seen is Max Crosby, which if this guy is even half of what Max Crosby is, we are going to be in very good shape, because he is also going to have the benefit of being across from Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat can do the dirty work and be the threat that he always has been, and continue to take double teams, and that's going to open up opportunities for the rest of the guys on the defensive line. So really, really liking what I'm seeing there. And last thing in the cons was he is very inconsistent. So he'll get like a quick jump off the ball, but then he might not know how to use, he might not use a great move for the situation, or if the offensive lineman gets his hands on him first, he might not be able to. He's just, it's very boom or bust, I guess, every snap with him from what I've seen. It's either he's like ripping away, flying around, and flying into the backfield, or he's locked up. There doesn't seem to be much of an in-between. So again, that's really the only other con. It's very tough to gauge these players because of limited experience. But you just keep looking at the intangibles of 6'5", 34-inch arms, 4'7", 940, still being pretty quick. And you see that he doesn't have to be the main threat across from Montez Sweat. And he had production being the main guy at Kansas. 27 hurries is huge. So that means that he is getting back there. He is pressuring the quarterback, and even just pressuring the quarterback can be huge. So I think also if we see production from Gervon Dexter this year as a 3 technique, it's going to make the edge's job even easier, because it's going to force the quarterback to scramble outside the pocket, and it's very tough to look around 2 6'6" guys, but also just pass it. You know, he did have a pass deflection, also forced 2 fumbles, which I like to see. Eberflus is very big on forcing turnovers, so hopefully we can see some more of that. But I really like Austin Booker. I'm very excited for him moving forward. One more time, Austin Booker out of Kansas, and just this kind of height monster that has a whole lot of potential, and we'll have to see if it works out. Now, this isn't a guarantee that he's going to be good. You see guys like Tyree Wilson, who had a similar frame, was mocked to Bears, a year ago or 2 years ago, whatever his draft was, and he hasn't really panned out. He hasn't really done much, and he's actually across from Max Crosby. So we'll see what happens moving forward there. But that's been Austin Booker. Again, let me know what you think of the pick down below. I think that he's a massive steal in this draft, and that even if it's not the first year, I think moving forward, I think Austin Booker is going to be a bookend for this defensive line, and I'm very excited about the pick. So thank you for watching, and bear down.